Hi everybody, it's Mark in TED again from TEDMARK Training for EFT and matrix re-imprinting. And we thought today we'd start right at the beginning because a lot of people say, "What's that thing you do?" And what's it called again? And it's emotional freedom technique or tapping. So Ted, how did you come across this in the first place?
Yeah, well, I was introduced to it, and it's a good question that we were looking at today. What is it? Because that's what most people say. Even my family, when I said I was going to do this, said, "This what? What is it?" And so we had to find ways to explain it. But I first came across it, to answer your question, from a friend, Carl Dawson, who is one of the 29 original world masters with EFT, and who has done metric re-imprinting, which we'll come on to talk about. But Carl introduced me to it and started studying it. And then he sent me an old CD-ROM of Gary Craig working with somebody on a fear of swimming, fear in the water. And that's exactly what I had in my late 50s. Mid 50s. I was still not able to swim. So I started watching and tapping along. And, through a process of feeling I could do it now, I went and actually booked some swimming lessons, and I can swim and swim regularly. In fact, I hope I'll be going today or tomorrow for a swim. It's a great form of exercise, and I really enjoy it. So that's how I came across it, introduced. I often say to people, then it started coming from everywhere to me. I quite often say that you don't find EFT, emotional freedom technique, it finds you. And lots of people said, "Oh yeah, I ignored it and it came back again." So
In fact, yeah, I had that experience. I was given a talk to a well-being group, and a number of people said, "Oh yeah, I've done this, and I meant to come back to it, but I never did." And I'm glad I'm here today to experience that. So yes, a number of people have come across it at some point in their life. For me, I actually met Carl on a marketing course, having first learned neuro-linguistic programming, moved completely away from the job I was doing in financial services. So I was on this voyage of discovery, and I came across Carl and sort of I found him, and there was something about this guy, something about Carl that I thought I need to learn more from him, and I'm just so glad I did. And for me, it was this realization that I had so many limiting beliefs, and my thinking was so narrow that this was going to get me out of it, and it certainly did.
we're starting to right at the beginning. What is this EFT? What's this tapping malarkey? This woo-woo stuff? People said to me one time, "I think you're turned into a bit of a fruitcake." And I thought, well, I like a bit of fruitcake, that's all right. But it's emotional freedom technique, and it uses a series of taps on points of the body, which will explain. So we found a good way to explain this was it's a bit like acupuncture without needles. So we're working on the energy system. And remember that everything is energy. You and I are energy. Um, the, the way we're communicating via the airwaves now and signals is energy that's bouncing all around the universe. And so from energy we come, and energy we always shall be. So it's working on the energy systems within the physical body and the endpoints. So we could maybe start just by showing people some of the points we use, some of the tapping points that we use. And we start at the top of the head, the top of the crown. You just use the point of your fingers, a few, 6 or 7 little taps, nice and gentle. I'm sure you've seen people beat themselves up, Mark, when you're trying to
Oh yes,
thumping away.
slapping
They think the
themselves.
harder and faster they do, the better it is. No, gentle. Your issues can be very tough. Be gentle. Be kind. Kind hands. And it's in your hands. That's what I like about EFT. It's in the client's hands. It's not what I do on them. I could tap on the clients, and a lot of people used to, but I prefer to just teach people to tap on themselves, particularly when you're
Yes.
doing it online like this. Well, then that's how it has to be done. And that's a good thing because I say it's in your hands. We go to where the eyebrow begins, side of the eye, under the eye, under the nose, on the chin, and the little dunk here. And just If you go to your collarbone and come out an inch and down an inch into the hollow under the first rib, each side, you can do one hand or two. These are the kidney meridians, the K27s. And then we go under the arm. For men, we say just in line with the nipple. And your woman just, where the bra strap is there. That's the spleen point. And we start here actually quite a lot doing a little setup, which we call the karate chop on the side of your hand that you would chop. And again, just using the fingers. Now, there's some other points, but that's a simplified version of the points you use. But what I'm trying to explain to you is what you tap on certain, these are end meridian points in the body. Some people have a favorite point. Do you have, Mark? Have you a spot you go to?
Mine is the collarbone. I feel I get the most out of that one. I feel I get
the kidney meridians. Yeah. And people do this naturally, don't they? I just realized I was starting. Sometimes people they go like this, or they go, when they get shocked, they'll actually go here. People tap. There's lots of points on the end of the fingers that we use as well at times, but people will drum their fingers, biting the fingernails.
Yep.
Why do people do that? They are stimulating then, and they're bringing the body out of the fear, out of the fright that you're in, caused by a thought. As Gary Craig said, you have a negative thought, comes in a warning, boom, and immediately the energy system in the body goes onto alert, flight, fright. And this is to bring you back out of the flight, fright, which is here in the subconscious, where you don't know what to do, where you're shut down, where you can't think. You're in survival. And it brings you back into thinking and helps you see it's okay, you're safe, and you can work out a solution. So these are the effects of tapping. Like with acupuncture, it starts to clear those disruptions on the energy system. What else would you say, Mark, it does for you?
Yeah, it certainly brings down the intensity of the situation that you find yourself in, where the subconscious is running the show and bringing the conscious back into it, so you can think more clearly and address the situation that you're in.
You're bringing yourself from that sympathetic state of flight, fright back into the parasympathetic of I'm okay. And then you can work out your solution and carry on with it. So it's working out. And it's a really good relaxation technique. Sometimes you don't even need to know what you're working on. I've tried this just tapping when I'm sitting. Just keep tapping and breathing. And while stuff's running in the background all the time, nagging away at you sometimes until you get really upset. And just keep that at bay, keep it down, keep it low. And you start to realize that you're feeling less anxious generally. And this is really good for what a lot of people suffer from is anxiety and generalized anxiety, and they don't even know why. Yeah, I'm upset, I'm anxious, and I've nothing to be worrying about, but I'm worrying.
Absolutely.
And this is very good. But then when we start to work, we get into what it is causing the worry. But that's for another video. Today, we just would like to try to explain to you what this woo-woo stuff is, this tapping malarkey, as people have addressed it to me. Yeah.
And you mentioned it earlier, the gentleness of this technique. We can be dealing with huge things, very traumatic events, but we're doing it in a way that is very, very gentle. And I think that's wonderful. People. And the other thing about this is that although we teach the tapping, individuals can go away and work on themselves anytime, any place. With acupuncture, you have to book an appointment. You may not like needles. With tapping, any spare 5 minutes, you can do it. I know colleagues of ours, they tap in the shower or when you're stuck in traffic, which can be sort of quite anxious.
Yeah, I used to do that. When I was driving in London. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Tapping.
I've done it on a plane. I've tapped with people on the plane during takeoff or in a train or wherever they're in a car, wherever they're anxious. They can take the edge off and then get some help with the big stuff with a practitioner. But this is really good because you can teach your clients and give them a resource that they go away and work on themselves in between the sessions as well. And then, like I said, it's very empowering for the client because it's in their hands. They don't have to keep coming to you every week for the rest of their life. They come along and do some stuff. They may come back in a couple of years or a couple of months if something else comes up. But generally you can give them these resources that they can get through. And when they become less anxious about life, they find the things they worried about, they don't even remember. And we'll talk about that in some of the other videos.
And so, the process itself is very, very simple, isn't it? It came out of something called field therapy, where there were methods for each individual type of emotion. Gary Craig simplified it. So once you learn it, you just tap down the various points. It just becomes a habit, and becomes a habit very quickly. And if you
people may have heard of the thought field therapy, in fact, and get confused TFT, and have seen it being used. I've seen it being used by people like Paul McKenna and other people on television and videos. So yeah, Gary's things made it simple, hasn't it?
Yes, it makes it very easy to learn. You can learn tapping in 10, 15 minutes. It just becomes a habit, and it's just great for that.
So the points we're tapping on, as I said, are sort of end meridian points in the body. This is the stomach meridian, for instance. What can you use it for? When we say try it on everything, it's great for anxiety, physical pain, depression, fear. Anxiety, as I say, is the big one, and because anxiety is there for most of us these days, and there are many, many triggers for anxiety, and we all have our own flavor of anxiety and fear. And I found that using this, it helps me that when I face situations where in the past I would have immediately been triggered into fear and anxiety and disaster and negativity, that I just can look at it now and say, okay, so what do I do now? What can I do? And find some resources. Quick tap and breathe and say, okay, I'm fine. This has happened and I'm okay. Rather than going into the whole spiral of depression downward. And people who are anxious, and particularly, say, with social media and things these days, I call anxiety the what if disease. There are all sorts of unspoken threats made these days, sort of all this gaslighting and, fake news, all the stuff that we see that's bringing us into disaster mode and keeping us on edge. It's all around us, no matter, you can't avoid it. And so this really helps you to keep out of that and keep out of the what if disease and stay with what is. So it brings you out of here where the what if is. That's all the disasters are running there, because that's what it's programmed for, that survival mode, flight, fright. And here it's no, it's what is, I'm okay. That's happened, but I'm safe. I may not like it, but I'm okay.
Yeah.
And so that's what EFT really does. For me, in a simple terms, it keeps you conscious. It brings you out of that subconscious where you become paralyzed and powerless.
Yes. It gives you thinking time, and as you say, it brings you back into the conscious and the conscious
mind.
Yeah,
because it brings you back into the thinking space, into the conscious mind. Yeah, absolutely. Thinking time. People say, if only had time. Yeah, well, tap and bring yourself into the place where you can think and give yourself time. But what causes this anxiety as well, Gary Craig explained very nicely. You have a negative thought, and immediately, boom, the body goes into this negative response, into the flight, fright, on guard. And this is quite often, these are false alarms. You don't have to run or fight. You're worrying about things that will never happen. And so this really helps you to keep clarity, and it's a great tool. So there's nothing woo about it, as I say, we naturally do it. Anyway, people even make the sign of the cross. They touch things, they wring hands, they tap fingers on the desk, they bite the fingernails. They're actually stimulating these meridian points in the body to clear that negative energy and settle that back into the conscious mind where you feel safe. Okay. Now, people are amazed sometimes how quickly it can shift something that's a big problem for them and a big reaction. So they develop a new way of dealing with certain things. And that's the great thing. It's not just in the moment, it gives you relief. It gives you resource for future when this happens.
We'll talk about more about that in future little clips.
Absolutely. Now, some people think, "Oh, what's that bit?" and they need to know. So we've done little charts, little diagrams, which will hopefully we'll be able to include one on the YouTube channel, just for your information to see, when you're tapping on something, and why you might go to a particular point. And it's just interesting. You don't need to know acupuncture. You don't need to know what the points are you're tapping on. Just know that we do the whole sequence and cover the major ones, so we don't miss anything out.
Yeah, that's great.
And,
we'll put that on all our social media channels, and so Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. It will be on there for everyone.
So we'll be back soon with a bit more information. And if you look on the YouTube channel, which Mark will remind you the name of in a moment, we'll post those little diagrams or anything else that we think would be useful to give you the basics of what EFT is.
So we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, all under the TEDMARK Training banner. So have a look on there, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Speak in a few days again. Bye.
Bye.